In the distant year of 2015, freaks rule the planet. And only you, an anthropomorphic eagle with a jetpack, who I think is also a terrorist or something, can stop them. Welcome to Alien Soldier.
I'm gonna take a wild shot in the dark here and guess that a bunch of you watching have probably never heard of Alien Soldier before, and up until a few months ago, I hadn't either. But oh boy, am I glad that I found out about it. Before I get ahead of myself, though, I should probably explain what this game even is. Alien Soldier is a run-and-gun game which was developed by Treasure and released for the Sega Genesis in 1995. If you don't know who Treasure is, they're a cult classic developer known for making action and shoot-'em-up games, namely Sin and Punishment, Ikaruga, and Gunstar Heroes. They also made Wario World for some reason too. But back to Gunstar Heroes. It was the first game Treasure ever released, and it's probably their most acclaimed too, as it's often considered to be one of the greatest Sega Genesis games, and is even listed as one of the best games of all time on Wikipedia. But that wasn't enough for Treasure. They could still do better, and they did. After the release of Gunstar Heroes, Treasure divided themselves into 4 teams, with each team working on a separate game. One of these games was Alien Soldier, and while it wasn't meant to be a direct successor to Gunstar Heroes, both games share a lot of ideas. Notably though, Alien Soldier was designed specifically for hardcore gamers, and not only is it more difficult than Gunstar Heroes because of that, it's also a bit less child-friendly too. Anyways, it's time I stop talking about what this game is, and instead start talking about how the game is. Upon startup, Alien Soldier gives the player a short and simple rundown of the plot.
The year is 2015. The planet Sierra is gripped by fear and is in the midst of a deep crisis. The evil terrorist group, Scarlet, are still a commanding force. They have the power to prevent humans. Members consist of artificial beings created using supergenetic engineering by the Sierrans. Scarlet is an underground organization to their high level of intelligence and awesome strength. Scarlet's members are equipped with parasitic abilities that allow them to live with the boss of the Scarlet Group is the intended target of an assassination attempt being planned. Seriously damaged by the attack, was thrown into the time-space continuum, which had been activated by Tiger ordered an attack on the Sierrans Research Laboratory, where children with superpowers were being held hostage to get Epsilon out of the boy's body. G-Tiger took a young girl hostage and threatened to kill another Birdman with a similar body had been created. Although their bodies were
Yeah, just kidding. This synopsis of the plot is anything but short, and the plot itself is total nonsense. Thankfully, though, this intro sequence is completely skippable, and the story is only referenced again visually a few times throughout the game. Okay, let's start for real this time. The first thing you do in Alien Soldier is pick which weapons you want to use. There's 6 in total, but you can only carry 4 at a time, and figuring out which 4 you want is actually quite an important decision. Despite how similar some weapons may seem, they all have unique functions, as well as different strengths and weaknesses that need to be considered. For example, the Flame Force does more damage than the Homing Force, but the Homing Force can home in on enemies, hence the name. And while the Lancer Force might do the most damage, it's hard to hit enemies with, and it runs out of energy fast. Speaking of, all of the weapons in this game require energy to work, and when they run out, they can't be fired anymore. However, a used weapon will recharge automatically whenever it isn't equipped, and this helps to ensure that the player actually uses their entire arsenal. Some weapons are also more effective on certain enemies than others, and this often gets you to switch between weapons too. Switching weapons is done through a weapon wheel, and I'd like to highlight that this weapon wheel does not pause the game. While this might seem kind of inconvenient at first, I think it adds a lot of depth to the gameplay. You can't just change your weapon out whenever you want, you have to find the right time to do it, and this keeps the gameplay exciting and frantic. While the weapon system in Gunstar Heroes was neat, there was nothing to stop you from just holding down the fire button the entire time you played, and I'm glad that Treasure went the extra step to make the shooting more interesting in Alien Soldier. I also really like the weapon selection screen in this game too. It looks cool, it shows off what all the weapons look like, and it even lets you customize the HUD. You can have these standard health bars, numbers like in Gunstar Heroes, or any combination of the two. And if you're a psychopath, you can just make everything a complete mystery. You won't know how much health you or the boss has.
Game over.
After you pick which weapons you want, you're then shown the controls and are given a little room to test them out in. There's your standard jumping and shooting, but you can also hover in the air and teleport too. The teleport is useful for dodging attacks, and it's activated by pressing down and then jump, which is definitely a little weird, but once you get used to it, it works really well. This teleport also turns into a giant fireball attack at full health, and it can be really effective against bosses. Then there's the two different shooting modes that you can switch between. The first mode puts you in a fixed position while shooting and lets you aim in 8 directions, and the second mode lets you move while shooting. This is a feature that Gunstar Heroes had as well, but I think that the way it's implemented in Alien Soldier is much better. In Gunstar Heroes, these two firing modes were unique to two separate characters, and you could only play as one character for the entirety of the game, so you just had to pick which one you liked more. In Alien Soldier, though, you can just quickly switch between the two shooting styles whenever one might be more useful. And if you're wondering why the game can't just let you aim up and down with the triggers, like in Super Metroid, that's because Genesis controllers don't have L and R triggers, so this is the best solution that Treasure was able to come up with. And last but not least, there's the Counterforce, which can launch mines and turn enemy projectiles into health. It's one of the most useful moves in the game, and it's often the only way you can get health back during a boss fight. However, the game doesn't actually tell you what the Counterforce does, just how to do it. As a matter of fact, it doesn't tell you what anything does. The game just tells you to pick 4 weapons, shows you the controls, and then drops you straight into the action. To find out what each weapon does, how the two shooting modes work, and what the Counterforce is for, you'll just have to test them out yourself. And along the way, you'll realize that you can also stick to ceilings too. Because of this, Alien Soldier has a pretty steep learning curve, and playing it for the first time is kinda like being thrown into a pool when you don't know how to swim. Sure, someone told you how to swim, but without any real practice, you'll ultimately just end up floundering around until you inevitably drown.
Game over.
While it might be tempting to criticize Alien Soldier for being so hands-off, I do recognize that this is just how a lot of games were back in the 80s and 90s. They weren't expected to be super convenient, and if you didn't know how to play one, then you were just supposed to read the manual. I don't think Alien Soldier leaves you completely high and dry though. It does give you enough information to be able to figure out everything else on your own. And if you're really struggling, then you can watch some of the idle demos on the title screen to get a better idea of how to play. And trust me, this game is worth learning how to play. Blasting through hordes of freaky enemies is a ton of fun, and the way you can weave through obstacles is super satisfying. But that's not what makes Alien Soldier really good. This is. The bosses in this game are fucking awesome. Like, look at this guy. He's a cowboy wolf riding a cyborg horse. That's badass. And the animation and sprite work done here is just gorgeous. I especially love how the horse's body is all segmented into different parts. It looks really cool. Every boss in the game is like this too, and I can only imagine the amount of work it took to make them. I'd like to give a special shout out to this big guy. Not only does he look totally radical, but he also has Death Star arms. And then there's this boss. Its name is Joker, because Joker. And that's what you get with Alien Soldier. A lot of the bosses are either super badasses or complete freaks of nature. And Treasure did not half-ass these freaks either. They look truly disgusting. I mean, what even is this thing? It kind of looks like an Ankylosaurus skeleton, but it's all fleshy, and it has a helicopter rotor. Like, how the hell do you come up with a design like that? And then... Oh god, no. No. Please. Not again. The bosses in Alien Soldier aren't all looks either, they're super fun to fight as well. Each one has a unique moveset that you need to learn, and they all have their own weaknesses that you can exploit. Take this handsome looking guy for instance. You can do more damage to him by shooting him from behind, plus you can counter these falling mines back at him to do a bunch of damage too. And then there's the bosses with set pieces. In one level, you save this cute little bear from a bunch of freaks, so he jumps into a speedboat and starts driving you around like a total badass. But then a giant lobster comes up and kills him, the cheap bastard, so you have to fight the lobster while the boat is still moving. Awesome. Then there's another level where you get picked up by this giant bug, and you're like, oh, this is the boss. But then it gets caught in a big spider web, and you have to fight the spider instead. Awesome! If you haven't noticed by now, Alien Soldier has a lot of bosses, and this is actually one of the biggest differences between it and Gunstar Heroes. That game has a pretty even mix of running through levels and fighting bosses, but Alien Soldier is more like a giant boss rush. There are levels, but they're all really short, and they mainly act as downtime between each boss. A lot of the stages are interconnected too, as a new one will often start where the last one ended, and while they don't all do this due to some transitions to new locations, your current health and weaponry are always carried over between stages. And I really like this, because I think it makes the game a lot more strategic. The short levels between each boss give you an opportunity to regain your health before the next fight, and if you know that an upcoming boss is weak to a certain weapon, then you can try to pick it up ahead of time. You can also pick up the same weapon twice to raise its maximum energy, and this can give you a huge advantage against bosses. But if you die, all your weapons go back to normal. And if you die 4 times, your ass gets sent all the way back to the title screen. Seriously, you only get 3 continues, and once you die a 4th time, you have to restart the entire game. But thankfully, that only happens on the default difficulty. If you go into the options menu, you can switch the game's difficulty from super hard to super easy, which is a really funny set of options, by the way. Like, you either have to play on the manly difficulty, or the baby difficulty. Anyway, the super easy difficulty makes things significantly more fair. You get infinite continues, you're allowed to switch weapons after you die, and you're even given access codes to each stage. It's basically the training difficulty, and once you've become familiar with all of the mechanics and bosses, you can try to take on the super hard difficulty. And that's exactly what I did. I played through the game on super easy a couple of times, then switched over to the harder difficulty, and was eventually able to beat the game without dying a single time, which I'm still not sure how I did that. Even on super easy, Alien Soldier is a seriously difficult game. One of the bosses has 5 phases, and you have to beat them all back to back. It is so hard. And it's not even the final boss either. There are 5 more bosses after this one, and they're all way easier. At first, I thought that was kinda weird, but after playing through the game a bunch, I don't really mind it anymore. The game pretty much just throws its hardest boss at you before the end, and then lets you play around in space as a reward. Funnily enough, the hardest boss in Gunstar Heroes is almost the exact same as this one too. They even have the same name and music. But what do I not like about this game? Well, not much, actually. I think some of the transitions between stages can be pretty abrupt. Like, somehow you go from being in a building, to being on a train, to then being in this weird sewer that looks like it was made by H.R. Giger, and the game doesn't explain it at all. It's not a huge deal, though, and all of the different stages look great anyways. There's a part near the beginning of the game where you go into this warehouse at sunset, and when you go back outside in the next level, the sky is changed to dusk, which is a great little detail. And look at this guy! He looks like a shitty Star Wars extra. Oh wait, I'm supposed to be talking about things I don't like. I guess the story isn't great too, which I mentioned before, but it's not like you need to know what's going on in the plot in order to recognize how awesome this game is. Though that being said, I do recognize that Alien Soldier isn't going to be for everyone. In fact, it's probably only appealing to weirdos like me. But if you're a weirdo too, then I would seriously recommend checking this game out. It's genuinely great. As for me, I'm gonna go find more shoot 'em ups to play, because I had no idea what I've been missing out on.